Christmas Eve, 1945. A house burns to the ground in West Virginia. 9 children are inside. 4 escape. 5 don't. But here's what haunts investigators to this day. When they sifted through the ashes looking for bones, looking for teeth, looking for any remains of those 5 children, they found nothing. Not a single bone, not a tooth, not a trace. The fire wasn't hot enough to cremate 5 children. The fire department took 7 hours to arrive. The evidence was compromised from the start, and in the days that followed, witnesses came forward with stories that made no sense. A woman claimed she saw the children in a car that night. A hotel worker said they stopped at her establishment. A private investigator found a photo of a young man who looked exactly like one of the boys, taken 20 years later. For 50 years, the Sodder family kept a billboard on their property with the faces of their 5 missing children and one question: what happened to our children? This is the story of the Sodder children. A mystery so disturbing, so full of unanswered questions, that it consumed an entire family for half a century. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why they could never let it go. Because nothing about this fire makes sense, and everything points to something far more sinister than an accident. Let's begin. Quick pause. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next mystery. George and Jenny Sodder were Italian immigrants who came to America for a better life. They settled in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and built their dream from nothing. George worked hard, started as a truck driver, eventually owned his own trucking company. Jenny ran the household. Together, they raised 10 children in a 2-story wood frame house. Marion, the oldest, was 17. Then came George Jr., who was 16. The family called him Junior. Then there was the rest of the children: John, 23. Then Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty, and the youngest ones. But the 5 children who would vanish that night were Maurice, 14 years old, quiet, responsible, loved working with his father. Martha, 12 years old, bright, curious, always reading. Louis, 9 years old, energetic, playful, always laughing. Jenny, 8 years old, named after her mother, shy but sweet. Betty, 5 years old, the baby of those 5, innocent, full of life. The Sodders were a close family. They worked together, ate together, celebrated together. But there was something else about George Sodder that would become important later. He was outspoken, especially about Mussolini and the Italian fascist regime. George hated Mussolini, and in a small town with a tight-knit Italian community, some of whom still supported the old country's politics, this made George enemies. There were arguments, heated ones. George didn't care. He spoke his mind. In the months leading up to Christmas, 1945, strange things started happening. A life insurance salesman came to the house. George refused to buy. The man got angry, looked at the house, and said something chilling. "Your house is going up in smoke one of these days, and your children are going to be destroyed." George dismissed it as the anger of a rejected salesman. Then, in the fall of that year, someone tried to tamper with George's truck. The electrical wiring was cut. The cause was never determined, but George suspected sabotage. A few weeks before Christmas, Jenny found a strange man watching the children play in the yard. When she confronted him, he claimed he was looking for work. But he never came back for work. He just watched. These incidents unsettled the family, but they tried to move forward. Christmas 1944 had been joyful. Christmas 1945 would be unforgettable. but not for the reasons anyone expected. December 24th, 1945. The Sodder household was alive with the energy of Christmas Eve. 10 children running around. Laughter, decorations, the smell of cooking. Jenny was preparing for Christmas dinner the next day. Around 10 p.m., the older children started heading to bed. But some of the younger ones, including Maurice and Martha, asked if they could stay up a little longer to play with their new toys. Jenny said yes. George went to bed around 10:30 p.m. Jenny stayed up a little longer to finish cleaning, then went upstairs. At 12:30 a.m., Jenny woke to a loud noise on the roof. It sounded like something rolling across the shingles, then a heavy thud on the ground. She got up, looked around, saw nothing, and went back to bed. At 1 a.m., the phone rang. Jenny answered. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, asked for someone who didn't live there. Jenny said it was the wrong number, but before she hung up, she heard something in the background. Laughter, glasses clinking, like a party. Then the woman laughed and hung up. Jenny went back to bed, uneasy but tired. At 1:30 a.m., Marion, the oldest daughter, woke up to the smell of smoke. She opened her bedroom door and saw flames climbing the stairs. The walls were already engulfed. She screamed, "Fire! Fire! The house is on fire!" George and Jenny jolted awake. Smoke filled the upstairs hallway. Flames roared from below. The house was already an inferno. George grabbed Marion, and Jenny grabbed the 2 youngest children who were in the room with them. They ran downstairs, choking on smoke, the heat unbearable. They made it outside. George turned back. His other children, he had to get them out. He ran to the side of the house where Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty were sleeping. Their bedroom window was on the 2nd floor. "Kids, jump!" he screamed. "Jump out the window!" Nothing. No response. No movement. George tried to go back into the house, but the flames were too intense. The staircase had collapsed. He ran to get a ladder, the ladder that was always leaning against the side of the house. But it was gone. He looked everywhere. The ladder had vanished. Fine. He'd use his trucks. He'd park them under the window, climb on top, and pull the children out. He ran to his trucks. Both trucks, which had been working perfectly the day before, wouldn't start. Neither one. He screamed for help. Neighbors started arriving. Someone ran to call the fire department. But here's where it gets strange. The fire department, which was only 2.5 miles away, didn't arrive until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire started. Why? The fire chief later claimed he never received the call, but multiple witnesses confirmed the call was made. The chief also claimed his water tank truck had frozen and couldn't operate. But it was Christmas Eve in West Virginia, and while it was cold, it wasn't freezing. By the time the fire department arrived, the house was a smoldering pile of ashes. George, Jenny, and the 4 surviving children stood in the cold, staring at the ruins. The fire chief walked the scene. He poked through the ashes with a stick. Then he turned to George and said, "The fire was so hot it cremated the children. There's nothing left." And that was it. No investigation. No sifting through debris. No forensic analysis. The chief declared it an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring. Case closed. But George Sodder knew something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Because if the fire had been hot enough to completely cremate 5 children, leaving no bones, no teeth, no trace, then why were there still recognizable household items in the debris? Why did metal appliances still have their shape? Why were there pieces of furniture? Cremation requires sustained temperatures of 1,400 to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours in a controlled environment. A house fire, especially a wood frame house fire, burns at around 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit and is inconsistent. The fire chief's explanation was scientifically impossible. George demanded a proper investigation. He was ignored. In the days and weeks following the fire, George and Jenny started asking questions, and the more they asked, the less sense anything made. The ladder that George kept leaning against the house, the one he used regularly for maintenance, was missing the night of the fire. Days later, it was found at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet away from the house. Someone had moved it, deliberately. Both of George's trucks, which had been running perfectly the day before, wouldn't start that night. A mechanic later inspected them and found that the electrical systems had been tampered with. The distributor caps had been removed. Someone had sabotaged them. The fire department's claim that they never received the call was contradicted by multiple witnesses. One neighbor testified that he personally called the fire department at 1:45 a.m. and was told they'd send someone. They didn't arrive for 6 more hours. The fire chief's claim that his water tank truck was frozen was also suspicious. Other fire departments in the area operated that night without issue. George hired a private investigator to sift through the ashes. The investigator, a man with experience in fire scenes, found household items, metal fragments, and pieces of furniture, but no human bones, no teeth, no remains. He took soil samples and had them analyzed. The samples contained no trace of human remains. The investigator's conclusion: the children were not in that house when it burned. That strange phone call Jenny received at 1 a.m., 30 minutes before the fire started. The woman asking for someone who didn't live there. The laughter and party sounds in the background. Was it a distraction? Was someone making sure Jenny was awake and disoriented before the fire started? At 12:30 a.m., Jenny heard something roll across the roof and fall to the ground. What was it? George later theorized it could have been an incendiary device. Something meant to start the fire from the outside, not the inside. If the fire chief was right, and it was an electrical fire, it would have started in the walls or the wiring. But witnesses said the fire seemed to start in multiple places at once. In the weeks after the fire, witnesses started coming forward with disturbing stories. A woman who lived nearby said she saw the 5 Sodder children in a car on Christmas morning, the day after the fire. She said they looked scared and were with several adults she didn't recognize. A hotel worker in Charleston, West Virginia, said the children stopped at her hotel a few days after the fire. She served them breakfast. She was certain it was them. A woman in Florida claimed she saw Martha Sodder in a department store years later. She said Martha looked at her, seemed to recognize her, but then quickly left. None of these accounts were ever officially investigated. George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini and Italian fascism had made him enemies in the local Italian community. Some of these men had ties to organized crime. The life insurance salesman who threatened George months before the fire? He was later discovered to have connections to a local crime family. George began to suspect the fire wasn't an accident. It was a hit, a message. But instead of killing his children, they took them to punish him, to torment him. It sounds far-fetched, but in 1945, in small-town America, organized crime had reach, especially in immigrant communities. George and Jenny refused to accept that their children were dead. They spent every dollar they had searching for answers. In 1946, George erected a billboard on his property along State Route 16. It was massive. It featured enlarged photographs of the 5 missing children and the words, $5,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of these children. The billboard stayed up for 50 years. Thousands of people saw it. Tips came in regularly. Most led nowhere. George hired multiple private investigators over the years. They followed leads across the country, from West Virginia to Florida to California. Every time there was a reported sighting, the Sodders investigated. One investigator tracked down a woman in Texas who claimed to have seen Lewis, one of the boys, working at a carnival. George traveled to Texas. It wasn't him. Another lead took them to Ohio, where a young woman resembled Martha. They knocked on her door. She slammed it in their face. George wrote to the FBI, begging them to investigate. J. Edgar Hoover's office responded with a polite letter saying the case fell under local jurisdiction and they couldn't interfere. George tried the state police. They had no interest in reopening the case. In 1968, 23 years after the fire, Jenny Sodder received a letter in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man, roughly in his 30s. On the back of the photo, someone had written, Louis Sodder. I love Brother Frankie. Elil Boys. A 90132 or 35. Louis would have been 32 years old in 1968. The photograph showed a dark-haired man with features that resembled Louis, but older, weathered. Jenny was convinced it was him. George wasn't sure. They hired a forensic specialist to compare the photograph to childhood pictures of Louis. The specialist said there were enough similarities to warrant further investigation, but the letter had no return address, no postmark clues, no way to trace it. George and Jenny tried. They published the photo in newspapers, offered rewards, begged anyone with information to come forward. Nothing. To this day, no one knows who sent that photograph or why. George Sodder died in 1969, 4 years after receiving the photograph. He died believing his children were alive, taken, hidden. Jenny lived until 1989. She never stopped searching. She never took down the billboard. In interviews late in her life, Jenny would say, I don't care what anyone says. My children did not die in that fire. Someone took them, and I'll go to my grave believing that. She did. Over the decades, investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths have proposed several theories about what happened to the Sodder children. None have been definitively proven. The official conclusion, supported by the fire chief and local authorities, is that the children died in the fire and their remains were completely cremated. But this theory has major problems. House fires don't burn hot enough to completely cremate human remains. No bone fragments, teeth, or tissue were ever found. Household items survived the fire intact. Soil samples showed no trace of human remains. Most forensic experts who have reviewed the case reject this theory. George and Jenny believed the fire was deliberately set, and their children were kidnapped as retaliation for George's criticism of Mussolini and Italian fascism. Supporting evidence: the life insurance salesman's threat months before, the tampered trucks and missing ladder, witness sightings of the children after the fire, the 1968 photograph of Louis, George's known conflicts with local Italian crime figures. This theory explains the deliberate sabotage and the lack of remains, but it raises questions. Why would the Mafia kidnap 5 children? Where would they take them? How could they hide them for decades? Some investigators believe the children were kidnapped and sold into adoption, possibly through illegal black market networks that operated in the 1940s. This was not uncommon during that era. Children were sometimes taken and sold to families who couldn't legally adopt. The children would have been given new identities, raised by other families, never told the truth. This theory explains the witness sightings and the photograph. It also explains why the children were never found. They were hidden in plain sight, living as someone else. A more fringe theory suggests that the children were taken by government agents as part of a covert operation, possibly related to George's Italian heritage and political outspokenness during the post-World War II era. There's little evidence to support this, but some researchers point to the FBI's refusal to investigate and the local authorities' immediate dismissal of the case as suspicious. One theory suggests the children did escape the fire, but died from exposure or other causes shortly after, and their bodies were disposed of to avoid an investigation into the delayed fire department response. This theory is dark, but possible. If the children died due to the fire department's negligence, covering it up would have been in the authorities' interest. We'll probably never know. The case is too old. The witnesses are gone. The evidence is lost. But the most likely scenario, based on the evidence, is this. Someone deliberately set that fire. Someone sabotaged the trucks and removed the ladder. Someone wanted to make sure those children couldn't escape. Whether they died in the fire or were taken, we may never know. But the official story, that they were cremated beyond recognition, is almost certainly false. The Sodder children case remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American history. It's a story about a family that refused to give up, a mother and father who spent 50 years searching for answers, children who grew up with the ghosts of their missing siblings. The billboard stood for half a century, a constant reminder to everyone who passed by that 5 children vanished on Christmas Eve, and no one ever found them. In 2008, the remaining Sodder family members finally took down the billboard. Not because they'd given up, but because they were tired of the pain, tired of the questions. But the mystery lives on. 5 children disappeared on Christmas Eve, 1945. No remains were ever found. The fire was suspicious. Witnesses reported seeing the children alive after the fire. The case was never properly investigated. Did the children die in the fire, or were they taken? If they were taken, where did they go? Who was responsible? Was the 1968 photograph really Louis Sodder? Sylvia Sodder Paxton, one of the surviving children, gave an interview in 2013. She was asked if she still believed her siblings were alive. She said, "No, I think they're gone now, but I don't think they died that night. I think someone took them, and I think they lived lives we'll never know about. I hope they were happy. I hope they were loved, but I'll never stop wondering what happened to them." The Sodder children case is a reminder that some mysteries are never solved. Some questions are never answered. But for George and Jenny Sodder, the not knowing was worse than any answer could have been. They spent 50 years staring at that billboard, 50 years wondering, and in the end, all they had were photographs, memories, and the unbearable weight of 5 empty chairs at every Christmas dinner. On Christmas Eve, 1945, 5 children vanished: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder. No one knows what happened to them, but somewhere, maybe in an old photograph, maybe in a distant memory, maybe in a story passed down through a family that doesn't even know the truth, those 5 children still exist. And the question that haunted George and Jenny Sodder for the rest of their lives still haunts us today. What happened to the Sodder children?